This is the Raising Rebellion podcast, episode number 17.
Welcome to the Raising Rebellion Parenting Podcast, where we will explore how to help kids seek purpose and passion, challenge society's expectations, and avoid a standardized life. Now here's your host, Paul H.K.
Hello, Rebels. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very grateful for you listening. Today, I'm very excited to launch a special 3-episode trilogy event. Jody Temple White, the catalyst and unconventional mom. Jan Black, the original rebel, seasoned marketer, creator, and builder. And Riley Temple, the millennial entrepreneur. Together, they make Rebel Generations, 3 unique rebel stories, one family. Each of them have such interesting, unique stories, and together they're part of a larger, wonderful example of a family who puts in hard work that creates a tight-knit bond between them. One of my favorite things from this experience for me was to hear each individual story, as well as the combined greater story of all 3 of them together, and how they move independently of one another, but also intersect and intertwine at different points along the way as well. They're just an awesome example of a new generation of family, as I'm calling them, that I have such respect and admiration for. One quick note before we begin, I typically release 1 episode every 2 weeks, but for this special trilogy, I'll be releasing 1 episode a week, so the wait between the episodes isn't as long as they normally would be. So let's get started with part 1. Jody Temple White has been on a wonderful, unconventional path since a few days before her senior year in high school, when she told her parents that she wanted to switch schools. A few years later, a conversation on an airplane inspired her and her entire family to sell almost everything they own and embark on a year-long journey of travel and service that would transform them permanently for life. I'm very excited about this whole trilogy. I hope you like it, and I hope you find it helpful for your journey as well. Here now is Rebel Generations Part 1, Jody Temple White. Okay, today I'm joined by adventurer, strategist, speaker, and author, the fantastic Jody Temple White. Jody, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Paul. It's great to be here.
All right, my pleasure. All righty, let's start at the beginning. Can we start with you telling me a little bit about your childhood, life growing up, and kind of a quick summary of your journey of where you are today?
Absolutely. So I was born in Chico, California. I'm the youngest of 3 kids. And when I was 3, my dad accepted a job up in Salem, Oregon. And so the family moved to Salem. And that's basically where I've grown up. So I grew up in Salem, was raised by my parents. We had a very, looking back, probably a very traditional life. We did not have a lot of money. We were, but I didn't know it at the time. Mm-hmm. So I felt safe, secure. I adored my older brother and my sister. Tried to follow in their footsteps as much as I could. Really I had a great childhood. We were, I was very involved in the church. And so we had really strict standards around how we could dress and behave and those kind of things. I attended a private school. My mom was a teacher at that school a lot of times, which is, I think, looking back, probably how we were able to afford having 3 kids in private school. Mm-hmm. I had a very traditional life. We're the classic neighborhood where, we'd leave in the morning and Dad would whistle at night for dinner and we'd come back, and it was safe and adventurous out in our neighborhood. We didn't travel a lot. We were tight with the people from our church and from our, community and school. But, everything was pretty much, this is the path. Mom, Dad, kids, and that's what you do. My senior year of high school, right before my senior year, I played sports. I did volleyball and basketball. And my senior year in high school, I had a moment where I knew that I was not going to be in a, how can I put this? I was not fitting into the traditional path anymore. And for some reason, I guess I had known it for some time, but I hadn't really acknowledged it. And right before my senior year in high school, I went home to my parents. My brother and sister were already out of the house. I went home and I said, I don't want to go back. I want to go to a public school. And I'm not quite sure. I've never asked them how they felt about that, but they supported me for some crazy reason. They supported me, and I ended up being the first kid to go to a public school, and immediately went. I mean, this was like days before my senior year in high school, and went to the public school and finished my final year at Cascade High School, which is out in Turner. And, looking back, I think, gosh, you know what? It was the best decision for me. Somewhere in my soul, I knew that that's what I needed to do, even though it broke the path of my brother, my sister, kind of what was expected of me. And then from that point on, my life didn't take the turns that my siblings did. My brother and sister both married their high school sweethearts. They're still married. They've got 3 kids. I, chose a different path, worked for a while, lived in an apartment, went to school on and off, moved to Pendleton, Oregon, where I got married to my first husband. And that marriage didn't work out. And I ended up moving back to Salem at that point with Riley in tow. Actually, he was in utero at the time. And became a financial planner and followed that passion of sales and, commission-driven process, and learned that whole system with baby in tow. Worked with business owners, female business owners mostly was my market, of single moms, business owners, and really educating them on the whole financial planning world, which is where I was at personally, trying to sort out how to be a single mom, earn money, survive, all of that.
Yep.
And, it was an amazing, crazy time. While my siblings were having kids, I jokingly say, my brother and his wife got pregnant. 9 months later, my sister got pregnant. 9 months later, I got pregnant with Riley. And then my sister-in-law went again. My sister went again, and I passed a couple rounds. I said, nope, I'm tapping out. We're not going to do that.
Pass.
So pass. And so then when Riley was 2, I got remarried to John, my current husband. We've been married for, we were married in 98. So it will be... I'm terrible. It's 18 years, 19 years. And it's been fabulous. And so that's kind of fast forward. I've done a lot of touch points in what I've done in my career, from financial planning to leading national conferences for women about financial topics. And then from there, I actually kind of resigned and retired from the financial planning world. John and I adopted Allison from Russia when she was just a baby. And at that point, I also started working for an international adoption agency, helping them with their operations and doing training for families. So all of those steps that I took were all about equipping people with skills and ideas and resources to make their lives better, easier, make them feel more confident, so they're able to then step out even more courageously in that. And when Riley was about 2, before Allison came into the picture, right after I got married to John, so in that little 2 to 4 age range, I met a woman who told me about a trip that she took when her kids were teenagers. And it was a trip that took them around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it the conversation on the plane because at that moment, it was like that moment in high school when I knew I was, going to take a different path. I remember saying to Riley, who was sitting there next to me on the plane, I remember saying to him, he didn't understand, we're going to do that someday. Mm-hmm. We are going to take off and travel the world someday. I don't know how, but we're going to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I told John when I got home, and he was like, okay. And so that started our what if conversations in our family mm-hmm. of what if we sold everything and traveled around the world? And we started asking that question when Riley was a toddler. And then when Allison came in the picture, we would just ask it randomly. And when Riley was 16 and Allison was 11, we asked the question, and the answer was, well, why not? What if we did it, and why not? And so that's what we did. We sold most of our stuff, packed up, and took 9 months and traveled around the world.
Pretty crazy amazing, first of all. And I mean, when you ask, I have like a lot of questions I want to ask you, Elvis. When you came home to tell John was just like, okay, let's go do it. Was it just that easy? He was just totally game for it?
He was, and I guess the two of us, I make it sound like it's so like, oh yeah, he just was like, sure, let's do that. Right. But in reality, that's kind of our personalities. And I think that's why he and I work so well together mm-hmm. is because we believe, okay, we may not have the answers of how we're going to do it, but we'll sort it out. We'll figure out how we're going to do it. And he had never traveled like that. I mean, I didn't have a clue. I didn't have a passport at that point. Mm-hmm. At that point, we hadn't ever even traveled outside of the United States. So Russia was the big trip for us to go meet Allison and bring her home. Mm-hmm. But before that, we hadn't done it. So he was like, okay, sure, let's figure that out.
Figure it out.
And I think that for us, I knew that I wanted to do it. I didn't fully believe until we had talked about it so much that, okay, this is possible. This mm-hmm. is something we could do. So yeah, John is my optimist. He's my yes man. He's always up for an adventure. And yeah, we'll figure out how we're going to do it. And so I love that about him. Because he does let me play in the what if world of like, what if we did this? And he's like, okay, let's figure that out. And not that he says yes to everything, because in some cases he'll be like, I don't know. And then as we play around with, well, what if we did it this way? Well, what if we did it that way? Then the fun of the adventure and exploration happens. And we end up coming to a place that everybody is excited about.
Yeah.
Is what we've found to happen in our family. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, I want to go back a little bit if I could. I'm curious about that moment of when you were about to go into your senior year of high school and all of a sudden you realized that you wanted to go to public school. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what do you think led to your decision right then? I mean, senior year, right? At that point, you would have had friends established, I'm assuming, and kind of your group, and senior year is kind of a big deal. And you chose to go to a brand new school with different people, right? How did that come to be?
Well, like I said, I think looking back, because I've kind of explored that and thought, wow, that's a pretty bold move. Because you're right, there's so many things. And I had gone to school with these friends since, kindergarten in some cases.
Right.
I'd known them all my life. But if I look back and when I've really taken a look, I know that the unrest started happening early, like about in my freshman year. Mm-hmm. I started seeing the hypocrisy. I started seeing the what I felt was deceit and the mistreatment of people based on their income and based on, so I started seeing the injustice that was going on in that community. And I started to, I think that if you ask friends of mine who knew me in high school and grade school, they would tell you that I was typically the one that would speak up and would like say, hey, to a teacher. I would butt my nose into situations and say, no, that's not right. You shouldn't be treating them that way. And of course, then I'm, sent to the school. So I did start getting some pushback against authority when I was seeing things that I felt were not right. And I think that my senior year, by that time, I think I had enough, I was strong enough at that point, and for some reason I knew that my mom and dad would say, okay, we're going to support you on this, that I think there was some final straw. There was a situation that happened with another person, and literally it was just kind of the final straw. I didn't get angry about it. It was just like, okay, that's what pushed me over the edge, and I just can't do this. I can't do it for them because they don't want somebody who's going to be causing this kind of problems. And I don't want to do this to myself. So I just basically said, I'm stepping out. And that's what I did. So I think that it was a culmination of a lot of things and probably my own growth and maturity of starting to see the world in a new light. As you do when you're in that age, right? You start putting things together. You start connecting lines. And I think that that's maybe what I started to do at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that would be even a little early. I feel like that's kind of when it starts to happen. But for you to make that decision for yourself, and awesome that your parents backed you up too. They're like, all right, let's move you. You weren't feeling comfortable. You weren't feeling right, and you're like, I want to make a change. So that's. It sounds like it started very early on for you, which I think is fantastic. That you were that self-aware that early on.
Well, thank you. I think I think it'll be interesting to ask my mom.
Yeah.
What they were thinking, because I can only imagine. I mean, I had a similar situation when Riley came home before our trip and said to us, I don't want to go back. But we also knew we were getting ready to go on the trip. So we knew that was going to happen, but we just didn't know it was going to happen so soon. And I wonder if that's how they felt when I came home out of the blue and said, I'm not going back.
Right.
So I can imagine they had some white knuckle moments of like, oh my gosh, this daughter of ours is not like the other. So what's happening here? I would imagine. And I think that's probably how, they've seen me as an adult too, of like, okay, Jody's she's going to go to the beat of her own drum. And, and they just know that. And my siblings know that about me too. I mean, I think at this point, they're not surprised by a lot of things when we say, oh, by the way, we're moving and we're traveling around the world. Right. They just kind of go, oh, okay. Like if anybody's going to do it, it will be Jody and John and the kids. So
there they go again. Right. Okay. Let's move into, as kind of a nice transition into, your family. One of the first things that stood out when you and I first met, was your business card. Because your business card, it's your Courage Vibe business card, and it has your whole family on there. And I just remember seeing that. I'm thinking, this is awesome. Like, who puts their whole family on their business card? So really fantastic. So can you talk a little bit about the Courage Vibe, which is your family adventure company?
Absolutely. So the Courage Vibe is what came out of our 9-month trip around the world. So when we decided that, when we had asked that question, what if we sold everything and travel around the world? And then we said, why not? And then what's next? And actually did it. We it was a case of people were like, well, what is the business going to be? And I said, well, we're just doing this trip because this feels like all four of us, John, myself, Riley, who was 16 at the time, and Allison, who was 11 at the time, we all said, yes, this is the time for us to do this. And so we kind of came to this crossroads, the four of us together, and said, let's take this leap. So we did. And the leap really wasn't designed to start a company. It wasn't designed to start doing tour guides with families or anything like that. This was really the four of us, our quest. For some reason, we felt called to do it. And so we created this mock itinerary. We made agreements before we left, meaning when I say that, I mean we had lots of great conversations about, we used what if a lot. Like, what if we get homesick? What are we going to do? And as a family, we would talk about it. What if one of us gets hurt or injured? But it was also like, what if we get bored? Because we're all pretty much doers, and we didn't want our trip to be one of like hitting every tourist site. We all agreed that we wanted this trip to be one that was organic. It was natural, where we could meet people, we could learn about culture. And then we all also agreed that part of what we wanted to do was find ways to give back to cultures. And so we agreed that we'd look for ways to volunteer and to provide service to the communities that we were staying in. And we didn't know how that was going to happen. So the Courage Vibe wasn't originally set up to be, this is going to be this great company that we're going to build. The Courage Vibe was set up to actually be the portal that could tell our friends and family and the people who were very concerned about our trip, because we had lots of concern shared about what we were doing and how we might be ruining our kids' education and all kinds of things and the places we were going. This was the portal to tell them how we're doing, who we're meeting, great organizations that we're meeting, the experiences we're having. And so to really help show them that there's life outside of the United States. Hate to say that, but there is. And to really start giving them a new perspective on life outside of the United States and traveling and backpacking with teenagers and preteens and what that means. And so that's where the Courage Vibe was started. And then when we got back, people started asking us to share our story. They were very curious about how we traveled with teenagers, right? Because we would hear people say, if my teenagers would never leave high school for the year, my teenagers, we would kill each other if we had to stay in a 10 by 10 room in bunk beds. How did you do it? What did you do? How did you plan this thing? And so we began speaking. And so the card came out of that in the fact that we would be speaking, the four of us together, and people would come up and say, do you have a card? And so it was like, let's just put it all on one. And because we're all part of the Courage Vibe, I mean, all four of us make it up, and we all have different perspectives to share. And so that's where that card came from, in the fact that all four of us bring a different perspective and a different point of view to the business. And so it's important that we're all represented on that. And so that's where that card came from. And so the Courage Vibe is really about, we do talks about travel, how to travel with your teens. Riley just wrote his first book called Get Going, and it's really a travel guide it was originally targeted for like the millennials and the high school, college kids who are getting ready to go on gap years. But a lot of adults have read it and gone, oh my gosh, this is great information. So it's a really great travel book. I have a book that's getting ready to be launched in January, and it's really an experiential type of a book for families with preteens and teens to help them find ways to live brave, give big, and have fun, which is our tagline. And these are all what-if experiences. Like, what if we smile at everybody we meet today? And then it's an idea of like, okay, we do it, and then we talk about it, and we figure out, like, did that work? Was that easy? Oh, realized I'm not a person that smiles a lot. Maybe I need to do more of that. So there's these 30 experiences that families can do. And it starts generating conversations and stories and experiences that what we've found is what brings families together and tighter. When we have shared stories, shared experiences, good laughs about things, we have vulnerability that says, oh my gosh, that was a really hard thing for me. And that's all what we did on our trip organically ourselves. So we're just bringing that to how can we help other families have those experiences. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense. I love it because I feel like family experiences these days, I don't know, I don't have any facts or anything to back this up, but I just feel like we're becoming a lot more disconnected in today's society, and everybody, staring at their cell phones at the dinner table kind of a thing. I mean, everybody looking down as opposed to interacting. So I love that you're doing something that's actually helping families re-engage, a lot. And I think it's so important to have that kind of support in life. So I love it. I want to ask you more about your book specifically. I have so many questions to ask you. I'm like overwhelmed with questions. It's when you decided, you and John could have easily just said, you know what, Riley and Allison, we're going on this trip, right? This is something we want to do. We think it's going to be great for you. We know you may not want to go, but trust us, kind of an approach. But for you, it sounds like it was important for you to make this kind of a group family decision, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How did you, bring it up to Riley and Allison, and at what point did they come on board and agree to do it?
So, like I said, we had spent, Riley remembers, hearing, what if we sold everything and traveled around the world? And we'd laugh about it, right? And it was around dinner tables, or it was in the car, it was whatever. Whenever we had moments where we were, just dreaming about what we could do. And so Allison when she came on the scene, same thing happened. So I think it was about when Riley was in middle school, when we really started going, really, what if we did that? And he kept saying, no, I'm not leaving my friends. This was in his middle school years. Allison was always on board. She was always like, yep, let's do this. I'm ready to go. So she was an easy one. She's like, sure, let's go. And Riley was like, nope, I'm not going to. And so we didn't push it. But what we as a family, John and I are really about personal development. And we're also about bringing the kids into that discussion about personal development. So, we'd read books. We've been involved in entrepreneurial business organizations and communities, and we would bring the kids in as often as we could so that they were exposed to those thoughts and those ideas. We would share with them things that we read in books and things like that. And so they were kind of brought into that really early. So they were used to hearing about it. When Riley was 14 at the time, I think he was 14, he attended with us a entrepreneurial community kind of event. And he was introduced to some folks who kind of started talking to him. And he was at that age where he was starting to take information from other adults, stuff that John and I had been sharing with him for years and he had tuned out. He now was starting to hear from other adults, and he was bringing it in and going, oh, okay, so it's not just my parents saying this stuff, it's other adults believe this too. Does that make sense? So it's kind of that. And so he I don't know if he said something to somebody about us, making a comment or a joke about us traveling, because not many people outside of our family knew that we actually talked about that. But at some point, he made a switch, and you can ask him about that. And I don't even know if he knows when that point was, but he made a switch and said, I'm open to the idea. He didn't say he wanted to, but you could see him turn in I'm not going to shut it down if it comes to me. And then the door became a little more open, and he wasn't saying, no, I won't do it. And then in his sophomore year, and he'll probably share this story with you, he came home the first day of the spring term and said, I'm done. I don't want to go back. We had already talked about doing the trip. So we had already agreed as a family, yes, we're going to do it. So he had said at some point, maybe in December, November timeframe before that, okay, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to do my junior year, and then I just want to come back for my senior year. Mm-hmm. And when he said that, John and I looked at each other and went, oh my gosh, this is our window. Like, this is where he said go. Yes. And so we have to act now before he changes his mind. And so we kind of said, oh my gosh, I remember like John and I together going, oh my gosh, he said yes. So we're really going to do this. Let's do this. I had recently read The Alchemist book, which had been on my reading list for years. And it's all about quests and adventures and all of that. And I gave it to John and I gave it to Riley, and they both read it. Mm-hmm. Allison hasn't read it yet. It would be one for her to read at this point. Mm-hmm. And so we just said, okay, we're in. And you're right. We did not want to make this a unilateral decision of like, Dad and I are saying this is what we're doing. And John talks a lot about that in our presentations and in talking with other people. He talks about the fact of how important it is to get the buy-in from everybody. Mm-hmm. Because what that does is when the going gets tough and you know, stuff is hitting the fan and everybody's upset or angry, if somebody doesn't have buy-in, that's when fingers start getting pointed, right? Mm-hmm. That's when it's like, well, you made me do this, right, and I didn't even want to come on this. Mm-hmm. And when we all had buy-in, nobody could point fingers. And we actually never had that moment of like, you made me do this and I hate this. And none of us ever said we wanted to go home. But I think it's because we did so much prep work. We did had so many conversations around, what are we going to do? What are we going to do if, like, I remember asking, like, if I start acting like a jerk on the road, how can we talk about it so you guys can tell me I'm acting like a jerk? Mm-hmm. Like, what is going to be our game plan on that? And then we went around the table and all shared, okay, you know, if I'm angry, don't come at me like this because that's only going to make me more angry. Maybe try this. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, kids, I give you permission to call me out in a loving, kind, respectful way. To say, mm-hmm, Mom, you know, you're being kind of mean, mm-hmm, you know, mm-hmm, and they did. And then that was my trigger of like, okay, I gave them permission to do that. Mm-hmm. So I need to figure out what's going on with me and why I'm being the way I'm being currently. Yeah. And we still use that technique today. But that all came because we did so much talking about how we wanted to be treated to each other and respected and how we wanted to operate as this family unit while we were on the road, if that makes sense. And I think that's what sometimes is missing in a lot of families is there's not that pre-discussion. There's not that you have permission to call me out when I'm behaving this way. Parents assume that role for their kids, right? We as parents are quick to jump in and say, you're behaving poorly. Right. But giving those kids permission to call out the parents in a way that says, hey, wait a second, you know, I can't behave that way, so you can't behave that way either. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And giving them the language to be able to say it in a way that's not offensive. And it goes both ways. And so that's really, those conversations at that level are what was so incredibly helpful to us as we traveled. Mm-hmm. And since coming home, we still tap into those techniques of like, hey, you're acting like a jerk, and I need to know why. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Let's get it solved so we can all be in a better zone. Right.
I love the communication. I love that it's, you made it a two-way street as opposed to just a one-way street from parent to child, you know. You gave them that permission, and you talked about how it's going to work for all you guys. So I think that's awesome. I don't think that exists a whole lot, you know, in greater society. I feel like parents just kind of feel like that they need to be the one that's always giving all the direction down to the kid as opposed to learning from the kids as well, you know. And I think that can help the parents too. So
And we did. I mean, on our trip, so the buy-in didn't stop on just the trip. I mean, we utilized that way of operating because when we took the trip, we had one-way tickets to Australia, and we had like 2 nights lodging laid out. We had a general plan of where we were going to go from there, but we had no dates. We had no itinerary from there. We had picked out, all of us had picked 4 countries that we wanted to visit. That we hoped to visit, but we were all open to letting fate take its course and lead us to where we needed to be. And I remember at one point we were in Cambodia. It was about this time of the year. And the decision was, do we want to stay in Cambodia or do we want to try to go up through Vietnam? And Vietnam was on our list of places we wanted to see. It was actually probably more in January timeframe because it was the Chinese New Year. And so as a family, what we did is, we basically took a vote. We were like, okay, so here's our options. We could stay in Cambodia and go out to this little island and do some, Riley got his scuba diving license he became certified in that. We were doing some other things too. Or we can choose to go through Vietnam. And so if we go through Vietnam, we have this amount of expense in visas. We're going to be moving. So we laid out all the plans. And then the 4 of us said, okay, so what do we want to do? And we made a decision as a group, again, getting that buy-in so that and we ended up staying in Cambodia and not going through Vietnam for a number of reasons. We just all felt like Cambodia was the place we were going to stay. And again, that's that buy-in, right? Because as being in Cambodia, none of us could have said, well, I really wanted to go to Vietnam and you guys made me stay here, right? That just didn't come up because we were all in agreement. And, I know that, again, it goes back to those conversations. It's back to the ability and the freedom of everyone in the group to say, wait a second, this isn't working for me. Can we fix something? Can we tweak it? Or, hey, I don't really like that idea. Can we try something else? And all of us being willing to hear that. And it wasn't about John and I. I mean, there were times that, of course, John and I, as the adults and the and the folks paying for it, that we made some calls of like, nope, this is how it's going to be. Sorry.
Right.
But the kids understood why we were doing it. Right. It wasn't a case of like arbitrary. So I think that having that 2-way conversation, and in our case, 4-way conversation, was critical and part of what we wanted to create. And what I can tell families who are parents who are listening to this podcast is it is possible, and you don't have to take a trip around the world in order to start incorporating these kind of conversations into your everyday life. You do not have to sell everything and travel the world in order to get good communication skills with your kids. You can do it every day in how you interact with them and the questions you ask and the way you respond to how they're replying back to you. I mean, so that said, because a lot of people go, yeah, but you traveled the world and that's why. And I'm like, no, this is stuff I did way before we ever got our passport stamped and all of that. So that's what I would encourage families who are heading into the teen years or are in the preteen and are bracing for those fights and the things that the media tells us, the hormone surges and all of that. Yes, it's there, but it doesn't have to be the chaos and the craziness that a lot of people put out there. It is possible to have a great relationship with your kids, one that's open, a 2-way conversation where they share with you what's going on and all of that. So that's what I want to if there's nothing else you hear from this podcast, parents know that it is possible and you don't have to take a world trip to do it. You can do it at your homes, wherever you're at.
Thank goodness, because I don't think I have the courage to sell all my stuff like you did. I'd like to take a world trip, but I don't know if I can sell all my stuff. Maybe I could. I don't know. So talking a little bit more about your trip, can you tell me some of the highlights? Some of the highs, some of the lows, how you guys were feeling as it was kind of winding down and you were about to head back to the U.S., what you guys were feeling once you actually arrived back in the States.
Yes. So we visited 24 countries in our 9 months abroad.
That's incredible.
I basically made a whole kind of loop, tried to stay in the sun as much as we could. And, we would stay in places from, a few days to several weeks, depending on kind of what we were feeling and what we wanted and who we connected with at the time. One of the highs that we had lots of highs, and there were lots of places. People ask us a lot of where was your favorite place? And, that is such a loaded question. There's so many beautiful places on this planet, and places we wanted to go but couldn't, either because of timeline or cost, because we were on a very low budget. By the way, this was not an unlimited checkbook thing. This was a low budget, high adventure trip. So one of the highlights, though, is one of the things we tried to do is meet as many people as we could. And so we would talk, and we stayed in hostels, and we decided that was a great place to meet other travelers and other backpackers, which was a great thing. And many people in the U.S. think hostels are more for college kids and non-family groups. In fact, in other countries, hostels are very much family friendly, or very oriented towards families. Of course, there are those that are more party hostels, but you can definitely find ones that are geared towards family and community living and that sort of thing. So our goal was to meet as many people as possible. And when we were in Cambodia, I keep bringing up Cambodia. Cambodia was a surprise to us. We didn't expect to go to Cambodia or expect to like it as much as we did, but we really liked Cambodia, and we spent, I think, 3 weeks there. And while we were on our last day on this island that I mentioned, that had just been great and magical, we met lots of people and that we're still friends with today. We were sitting there, and there was a gentleman, and John started talking with him, which is not unusual because John has never met a stranger, and he will talk to anybody. And he started talking to Isaac, and Isaac, asked the question because, we were kind of an odd family. Here's these grown kids, and, you see a lot of kids traveling that are younger, but usually not in their teens. So Isaac was asking us questions. Well, turns out Isaac lives in Israel. And in the course of that conversation with John, Isaac said, well, are you guys coming to Israel? And John's like, well, we haven't planned on Israel. We wanted to go to Egypt, but Egypt was in the middle of some disruption, so we couldn't go into Egypt. And Isaac said, and John's like, but we have to get over to Morocco, because we were actually meeting some folks in Morocco by a certain day. And he's like, so no, we hadn't planned. And Isaac says, well, why don't you come to Israel and stay with my wife and I? We have this house up in the Galil Mountains, and you can stay with us, and we'd love to show you around. And so these are one of those moments of saying yes. So John comes to me. He's like, hey, Isaac, this guy, he's invited us to come to Israel. So the impromptu trip, we went to Israel and stayed a week with Isaac and Dikla, his wife, up in the hills of the Galil Mountains.
Wow.
Where one side you see the Mediterranean Sea, and the other side you see the Sea of Galilee. We spent a little over a week in Israel and traveled all around, had amazing food. And it was one of the best. I mean, that was one of those impromptu, we're so glad we said yes. And so that was a fun moment.
Something you hadn't planned on.
Something we hadn't planned on.
Okay.
Israel was not on our radar of places to go, but we're very grateful that we did, and that was fun. There's moments that you're traveling in the middle of the night on an overnight bus, or you're somewhere on a train, and you're kind of like, where in the world is, I've been traveling all day. So there were moments like that where, we kind of questioned, what's happening? What are we doing here? And I guess I'm the type of person that I don't think a lot. I mean, people have asked me, what were the negative stuff? And there were some moments where we felt a little uneasy. We were in South America, and there were just some moments where you kind of felt like you were the target to some degree. And that was a little unnerving. But again, we had our safety kind of rules around how we were going to stay safe as a family. So those kind of situations, we would quickly get our, move on so that we didn't feel so vulnerable. But for the most part, what I can say is that people and you hear this from all the travelers. I'm sure every traveler you've had on here is going to say this. People are friendly if you're friendly to them. Mm-hmm. People want to connect. They want to find out about you, and just as much as we wanted to find out about them. We had moments of craziness that we laugh about now, but at the moment we were kind of like, oh my gosh, what's happening here? But we laugh about it now because it's a shared experience. It is definitely, for education purposes, for everyone in the family, traveling isn't just for educating the kids. It educated all of us. Mm-hmm. We have such new perspectives of the world. When things happen in the world, we're much more aware because we've been there. We know a little bit about the culture from the tip that we've seen of it. We're more in tune with like, oh, what is happening down in Java and in Indonesia when they're clearing out the trees and killing, the orangutans. And I mean, so the awarenesses that we all learned from the travel is, I mean, you can't replace it.
Yeah.
There's just nothing better. So given the chance to travel with your kids at whatever age, take it, even if it's for a week, a 2-week thing, take it, and you will never be the same. You will never be the same in a good way.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. So looking back, and I know you talked a little bit about how you were getting some feedback and resistance about, people saying you're going to screw up your kids and what are you doing? You're taking them out of school, you're messing up their education. Now looking back on that, and of course, after you get back, now they're all curious and they're asking you all the questions about it, right? But, so looking back on it, you took your kids out of school for 9 months. You guys traveled for that long. I would imagine you would do it again in a second. You already talked a little bit about how the education that you guys gained on a different level and from a different perspective, you have that. But what are your thoughts on traditional education versus that kind of experiential education? Do you think kids need a little of both, or do you think, maybe one should outweigh the other a little bit? What do you think?
So I was raised, of course, in traditional education where we had, sit in the classroom, study, memorize, lectures, those things. That's definitely how I grew up. Mm-hmm. I have 2 children who are both have different learning styles. Riley is a very much hands-on. He needs to move. He needs to experience. He needs to touch. He needs to do it himself. He's a very tactical learner, kinesthetic learner. That's how he is. Mm-hmm. Allison, we haven't really discussed this, but when she was 2, she lost her ability to speak and eat and swallow. So we spent a significant amount of time in the hospital with her. Mm-hmm. And she has since had years of speech therapy and is still working on her clarity of her speech, which that is a miracle in and of itself, that she's even alive and able to communicate verbally the way she does. Mm-hmm. So her learning style was very visual. And so she's a visual learner. She's the type that takes it in. She can look at a map and understand where she is in context with that. So I have 2 kids that are probably not in the scale of what traditional school wants to see. I have a highly active boy who in grade school, the teachers would say, Riley is great to have in class. We just wish he would stop talking so much and pay attention. And I would say, but is he keeping up with his grades? Yes, he is, but he needs to stop talking so much. And I said, well, later in life, that talking will be helpful because he's a great salesperson. And they're like, yes, but right now we need him to not talk. And if he does talk, we're going to take away his recess time, which I'm like, that's the worst thing you could do, because actually I'm giving you permission to go run him like a puppy outside. And just, if he's misbehaving, run him around the field a few times. They're like, we can't do that. That's corporal punishment. I'm like, okay, then you're going to have some difficulty with this one. Because, and then, and, of course they did like Allison because she didn't talk at all. Right. So that was good. But, but she was struggling because of her own learning styles and things like that. So is traditional learning a great platform? I think it's going through a huge metamorphosis, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Currently, Allison does online school. She manages it well. She has done it since third grade. She's done versions of online school. Riley did online school when I say online school, I'm meaning it's a self-study program that the school system allowed to give him credit. So if he would take the tests, and then he would take the class at his own speed, and then take a proctored exam at the end. If he passes, he gets a credit. That was great for him because he could get in, get the stuff done. And Allison is the same way. They can work at their own pace. They're both very focused on what I need to get done, and they'll get it done. Is that a great model for every child? I don't think so. But the good news is that there's so many types of learning environments now that regardless of what learning style your child is, there's something that can possibly help them. And so I would encourage parents to be open to that, because the way that we all learned, and, in my 40s here, and maybe a lot of the folks in your listening, the audience are in that age, it's changed dramatically. And there are so many options out there that are available for kids to learn. Experiential learning in our family is key, because that, again, I go back to on the trip. So Riley was taking a world religion class. And at the time we're going through Angkor Wat, we're going through, temples and, and churches and cathedrals. And we're learning about Buddhists, and we've been in Hindu and, the Hare Krishna. I mean, we're learning about all the religions firsthand. That makes it all come alive, obviously.
Yeah.
And if there's ways that you can do that to help your kids have that, what they're learning come alive in front of them, other than just at a screen or something, take advantage of that, because it will put it in a way that they won't ever learn from a book. And it doesn't mean you have to go to Thailand and see the reclining Buddha only to be able to see. There's lots of ways we can incorporate experiential learning into our everyday lives for our kids, because I think that really brings it home. And what it also does is it gives kids a chance to decide, is this something I want to pursue, right? Is this something that I really like and I want to learn more of? Because I got this experience, and now maybe I want to go down that road of studying world religions, or studying astronomy, or whatever it is that they're doing. That's what experiential learning does as well. It gives them a little insight of like, oh, maybe it's something they thought they'd like, and then they actually get in it and they're like, this isn't as much fun as I thought. Right. I mean, when we would volunteer and work in the animal, we did a lot of animal shelter work. And, we worked with donkeys and camels and cats, dogs, chickens, all of that. It's fun sitting around petting a cat and playing with a cat. But, the other part of that is somebody's got to clean out the litter boxes, right? And so it's like, so they learn quickly, like, I like the petting of the cat part, but the cleaning out of the litter box, not so fun. But can I take that piece knowing that I get to do the other, right? So that's what experiential learning does for all of us. And I mean, it's not just kids who do that, it's adults do it too. So as much as you can experience, it only broadens your horizons. And lets you know what you want to pursue or not pursue. Yeah.
I love how you really are in tune, and just, it seems like you just really pay attention as to what is working for your kids or not working for your kids, and kind of making adjustments along the way, Allison learns versus how Riley learns, and then just kind of moving them in that direction where they're going to thrive. I think I have some friends that are teachers, and they tell me that they feel a lot of times they feel like babysitters, and that the parents are just kind of throwing them into their classroom, expecting them to do a lot of work, not just teacher work, but kind of parenting as well. And they sort of feel like they've taken on this additional role that they haven't asked for a lot of times, which I found kind of interesting.
And I think that on that, Paul, though, I know we're probably getting close to the end, but I think that I know you're going to be interviewing my mom, and I think that in the case, I learned that from her. I learned that, and I don't remember if that's how she was when I was a young child, but I know in my adult life, I've seen her be open to changing perspectives, to pivoting when needed, to letting people be who they are and play to their strengths. And I've seen her do it. And so, again, I think that comes from watching her and from her letting me do that, right? Her not saying to me, Jody, you need to be like your brother and sister. They followed this path. They followed this. And instead letting me lead my own path and saying, okay, so you're getting a divorce and you have a little baby. Okay, let's make the best of this. Okay, you are adopting a child from Russia. All right, that's, what it is. And so let's just, and embracing that. And so I think that I learned, and I'm hoping that I'm passing that on to my children as well. And I think I have. I think they're very adaptable. I think they're very much into let's pursue this. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. I can pivot and try something else until I find what I want to do. And for some people that seems flighty. It might seem right. Like you need to set on a path and stick to it. And I think that's the old way. That's the old model. Yeah. And it's not part of the new model. And the new model is be expansive, try new things, and know that you're fine. You're fine. And I tell parents that a lot when they come to me and say, my kid is just about ready to take, I'm getting ready after this call to be on a call with a college friend of Riley's who's getting ready to go to Thailand for 4 months. And his mom has already, I think, not cursed our names, but she's definitely saying it was our fault that he's doing this. And I'm getting ready to get on a call with him to say, here's some ideas and here's some ways that you can help your mom understand why this is so important to you to be able to travel like this. So, I think that it's just a matter of okay, we're all going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Right. And these are all part of our life experiences. Right. That's great. Okay. Yeah, I know, I want to be respectful of your time too. I know you have that other call. So let's talk about your book. It's called The W3 Factor. Is that right? It is called The Parent Teen Playbook. And it is for parent teens, and it's 30 ways to play up what if with your family and with your kids. So there's 30 experiences, 30 little things that you can do. And there's 10, because our tagline is live brave, give big, and have fun. So there's 10 things about living brave, 10 things about giving big, and 10 things about having fun. That's a 30 total that you and your family can do. So it's an easy book that you can pick up at any point and say, hey, okay, everybody, today we're going to try a new food. We're just going to try something we've never tried before. And maybe the kids go to school and try the mystery meat on the cafeteria line. And maybe dad at work goes to a new restaurant or a new food cart that he has never eaten at before. And the idea is that you try it. And then, at some point when you're all down together in the car or around the table or wherever you're at together, you're able to say, hey, I tried some mystery meat and I have no idea what I just ate today. And it was chewy and gross and I'm never going to try that again. Or maybe they say, oh my gosh, I tried these Brussels sprouts in this new way with bacon and balsamic and all this. And I was blown away because it doesn't taste like the Brussels sprouts my mom made when I was a kid, right? Mm-hmm. And so, again, that gives everybody a chance to kind of share their experience. And the kids get to hear parents, go, oh my gosh, I tried this and it was disgusting. Or I smiled at somebody and they flipped me off today. And it's a funny story that you go back to later. Hey, Mom, remember that time you tried that and you almost spit the food out because it was so gross? I mean, who knows what that story or that experience was? But what it does is it sets a common conversation, and now your family has a new story to build on. Mm-hmm. And it starts that conversation. And so you're not just asking your kids, like, how was school today? Fine. What are you going to do tonight? I don't know. Right. What are you working on? It gives you a new way to have a conversation. And so there are things that are easy to incorporate, because I know lives are really busy, and putting together lots of big things, and it's not about that. It's about fitting these moments in when you can as a family. And there's some things like, host a game night. Mm-hmm. That takes a little more planning. But there are things that you can definitely, incorporate down the road in some point in your family. And, how to play games and not end up in a fight, those kind of things. Right. So that's what the book's about. And really easy. And the W3 factor is kind of the overarching piece of 3 questions: what if, why not, and what's next? Mm. And so getting families to start asking those what if questions and finding out where their what ifs are going to lead them, right? And how they'll lead you to a why not. Now, your what if question might not be, of course, what if we sell everything and travel around the world? But maybe your what if question is, what if we took 2 weeks? Where would we go? And leaving that kind of question to start having conversation with your daughter and with your wife, and saying, okay, well, what if we went here? Okay, so what would that mean? And then that generates more questions, and then it becomes a why not. And it doesn't have to be travel related. It just happens to be what I used as an example. So it can be anything. Mm-hmm.
I love how I think asking people to change behaviors, I think, can be really daunting, right? And I love how it sounds like you just broke it up into very easy, fun, simple things that the entire family can do, and you just kind of come back together and talk about it. I think that's fantastic in order to help build those blocks together. I think it's great.
Good. Well, I'm hoping that it resonates with a lot more families. And so the W3 factor is kind of the overarching concept of what if, why not, and what's next. And so I'm going to be launching that along with my book in mid-January. And that whole construct and information is to start helping families and show them ways that they can incorporate those 3 questions: what if, why not, and what's next? Because it is something that basically our family has done for years, and it has led us to all kinds of adventures. It's introduced us to people that we normally wouldn't have met, all because we've asked the what if question and let that what if lead us to why not, and then what's next. And so the idea behind the W3 factor is that we can get families to start having great conversations, adventures, having explorations, and just start integrating the simple little questions into their everyday life for problem solving, for different situations that they encounter, ways to come together as a group and say, okay, what if we did it this way? What could we create? All of that is the fun of experiencing life. And doing it as a family, and parents doing it with your kids, is an amazing thing to watch how they start problem solving and what they come up with. So the W3 factor, I'm excited about it. I'll be doing some training around it, how to incorporate it easily into your life without having the big family conference meetings, which are great if you can do it. Our family was never able to maintain a weekly family meeting. I know some families are great at it. Not ours. So I want to incorporate it, show ways to do it in catch it while you can moments. So that's what the W3 factor is. And the book will be part of that whole launch as well.
I love it. Can't wait for the book. I love how this, to me, really just feels like sort of a next gen approach to family that I really love. I love how you're curiosity sort of drives all these different things and engaging conversations and your family dynamic. I think it's really, really fantastic. And, saying before that, you give me a lot of hope as to what, family dynamics can be. And it doesn't have to be this separation once they become teens. It can just sort of morph into something that's different and more enriching and engaging and deeper. And it feels like that's really what you're putting out there and sharing with everybody else. So thank you so much for doing that.
And thank you, Paul, and for having me on here. And, you are an inspiration, and your podcast is shifting perspectives as well. And I just appreciate the fact that you're getting so many diverse folks on your podcast and giving all of us a chance to go, oh, man, that's pretty amazing what they've done. If they can do that, then maybe I can do something similar or take a piece of it and make it my own. And so I just congratulate you on what you've created and who you're pulling in as your guests. I'm so grateful to have met you, and I'm very grateful to be on your show and be part of your lineup. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Very kind. Okay. I'm going to ask you one final question, and this is the question that I ask all my guests. I advocate for parents to raise rebels, right? And basically, people who live authentically and pursue their own passions with purpose. How do we raise our kids to do that and to live an extraordinary life as opposed to living a life that someone else, has an idea of how we should be living? What advice can you give to parents and people to become successful rebels in life?
Oh, there's so many things going on in my head, Paul. I'm like, which one would it be?
Right. You can throw them all out there.
I would say, let your kids follow their guidance, their inner guidance, and trust them. You be the person to be the sounding board and to help in any way you can, but know that your children have an inner guidance and you are there to participate, but let them follow that guidance and support them. Even when it scares you to death, I guess would be my biggest thing, because this is their story and they're going to write their own story just like you wrote your own. So I wrote mine, and it led me in ways that I would never have dreamed when I was 15 years old. And they're going to have those same experiences. And so you being the support, even if you don't understand, even if you're afraid for them, supporting them and letting them know that you are there and you love them, I think would be a great thing. I think that's what I would tell them. Trust your kids' internal guidance. They're pretty smart kids. All of them are.
Yeah, I feel
they
like
just need to know it.
Right. I feel like we can impart more trust on our kids, and I know it's hard as a parent because you want to just protect them all the time and you want to make sure that they're safe, but I think it's that's great advice. Thank you very much.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Where can people find you online if they want to get in touch with you, learn more about your book and the W3 Factor? Where can they do that?
The best place is thecouragevibe.com. That is the best place to go. It will have the book. It has Riley's book. It'll have my book, information about the W3 Factor, all the things that we're going to be rolling out around this whole topic of family dynamics and family development. You will find it on the Courage Vibe site. We also have a Facebook page, The Courage Vibe, which you can go and definitely like and participate in. But those are the two best places to go. Website, thecouragevibe.com, and Facebook, The Courage Vibe.
All right. Fantastic. I have been speaking to adventurer, strategist, speaker, and author Jody Temple White. Her new book is called The Parent-Teen Playbook. Definitely check that out. I'll post links to everything that we've talked about in the show notes today. Jody, one more time, thank you and your family, really, for being just an incredible example of living with purpose and meaning. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat and share your story today. I know how busy you are, so thank you so much.
Oh, it was great. I always enjoy talking with you, Paul, and this was fabulous. So thank you for inviting me on.
My pleasure. We'll be talking very soon, I'm sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, you too. RaisingRebellion.com is where you can find all of our podcast episodes, show notes, and sign up for our mailing list for all of the latest updates. If you're enjoying the podcast, it would be a huge compliment if you shared it with other Rebel parents that you think might enjoy it too. But most of all, I appreciate you listening, and I hope you're finding some helpful information for your family's journey. Thank you for being here, and until next time, go Rebs.